But anyway, don't have to tell you to take your seats, you already have. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Columbia. My name is Connie Quirk, and I am the service leader of the day. Our minister is Reverend Stephen John Robinson. Today we have a special guest speaker from this congregation, Dr. Kevin McKinney. Our services are streamed on YouTube and Zoom. Welcome. No matter how you choose to join us, you are always welcome. For more information about UUCC, please visit our website at uucolumbia.org and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We also provide weekly email updates every Thursday. Families with children are out having vacations. All the children have gone on vacation with their parents, except for one. We do have 2 volunteers for the young, under 4 and under, and we do have 1 baby there. So maybe we'll get a few more, maybe not. Because it says today children and youth will remain in the service. Well, we don't have anyone in the service that's under 20. The flowers today. What? Oh, we do have someone under 20. All right, so we'll read you the children's story. All right, today the flowers, we have 2 sets. Rebecca gave us the sunflowers, and the begonias are on loan from our front porch. Only fitting for the topic today. We do have a special announcement from Jeanette. Where did she go?
Thank you, Connie. This is a special thanks to everybody who made food, contributed money, ate the food, helped clean up, and helped set up for our fundraiser last Sunday. And just want to make sure that you guys know that we took in about $900 that's going to go eventually, well, it will go to, kind of scholarships to help people get to the retreat, probably also help us with the annual volunteer week, and then ideally we will get to the point where we can partially subsidize everybody who goes to the retreat. And Jenny was going to make this, but just keep her in your thoughts. She's home with Jim, and it's thanks to her and Joan, who is out, Marlene, and Jason, who I don't see at this moment, but it's thanks to all these folks. And we really, really, really want to encourage people to come to the mountain for the retreat. It's a really good time to bond. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. Now please silence all devices and listen to the prelude.
Encore men, please come forward and join for the prelude. Connie said that a lot of the children weren't here and that a lot of people were on vacation. Well, we have like 12 people on our roll for the Encore group, but we only had the faithful show up with us this morning. So, but they'll sing a little bit louder. The piece we're going to do, you've heard this time and time again, the melody is the saints go marching in, but we've written different words to it to go with the theme of today. So we'll give this a try, and Kevin will cue you when it's time. Ready? Go. When this old earth cannot provide enough to me. It's time to wake up and start to clean up. Now is the time.
Thank you very much. Now, please rise in body and spirit and join me in the congregational covenant in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community, thus. Thank you. Unitarian Universalism is a diverse and non-creedal religion. Our community is based on deeds, not creeds. We are a covenantal religion, which means that we don't have to believe the same in order to treat each other the same, with respect, equity, compassion, and dignity. We side with love, embracing and welcoming all people. Our board members and committee chairs welcome your questions and your comments, and board members have green name tags if you would have questions or just would like to talk to a board member. Now, we'd like to recognize any guests or visitors who are here today. So guests or visitors, if you are willing and able, please rise and share with us your name and where you are from. Jim will be taking around the microphone. So are there any guests who are willing to let us know you're here? They're on vacation with the children.
Well said.
All right. Today's chalice lighter is Linda McLeod. Spirit of light and life, come unto us. And now our opening hymn.
Opening hymn, please stand. This is number 21. And it's about For the Beauty of the Earth. It goes with today's theme, because if we take care of the earth like we're supposed to, it will be beautiful and continue to be beautiful.
Thank you, everyone. All right, I'm supposed to introduce the speaker. I have a statement here that I need to read because I don't know him very well. Kevin McKinney is a native of Sault Ste. Marie, Canada. He is a musician, educator, writer, and technician. He holds a doctorate in musical composition from the University of Georgia. We came to South Carolina and UUCC in 2017 from Gwinnett County in the Atlanta suburbs, where we had lived for 20 years. During Kevin's Georgia years, he taught music at Georgia State University. He was a studio teacher of brass instruments, piano, guitar, and he also worked as a theatrical technician. Kevin has composed works for chorus and chamber ensembles. He is an active songwriter and arranger, and under the nom de plume, Doc Snow, has 2 self-released albums, Carolina Maze, which he released in 2020, and Damage, which he released in 2022. He is also the author of more than 100 online articles, including many on climate science history, also including many on how to fix different things around the house. Usually called How Not to Do This. He currently teaches at the Kershaw Fine Arts Center in Camden, South Carolina. Thank you, Kevin. And if you would give us opening words.
Thank you for that introduction. I didn't know you knew my online oeuvre that well. That's good. So the opening words are from 2 sources, as you see in the order of service. First, from an internet rando known only as Wilderness. Large numbers of people are not likely to equate with the forces of nature. Lots of people just does not equal global warming, no matter how many there are or how loud we shout that people are to blame. There is just no reason to think we've the ability to change the course of nature. And from the University of California Museum of Paleontology, quote, "The first pollution crisis hit the Earth about 2.2 billion years ago. Oxygen levels had been less than 1% of the present levels, but by about 1.8 billion years ago, they'd risen to more than 15% and were still rising. It may seem strange to call this a pollution crisis. However, even today, many bacteria and protists, don't ask, are killed by oxygen. Where was the oxygen coming from? Cyanobacteria. The first synthetic organisms that produce oxygen had become common, and their photosynthetic activity was responsible. So, consider the humble cyanobacteria, a one-celled force of nature that changed the course of nature."
Thank you, Kevin. And now it's time for Candles of Community. If you have a significant personal joy, sorrow, or concern you would like to share from the pulpit, we requested that you pick up a candle in the foyer prior to the service. We have an active caring committee for those in need, and they wear yellow name tags. Will those who have candles please come forward at this time and share briefly your joy or your concern?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Chuck Ashley. Chuck Ashley, can you hear me better? Yesterday, it was our great joy Bud and I, to visit my parents and celebrate my dad's 94th birthday. So this is a candle of joy to still have both of my parents alive, even though I'm in my late 60s myself. And also a reminder, as my dad reminded me, this month, 60 years ago, he was in Vietnam. Semper Fi, Dad.
I have a candle of joy. We've put together for this afternoon here, 4 o'clock to 5:30, a prayer vigil for peace in the Mideast. And we're wanting to just join together. We're going to hear a Muslim prayer, a Jewish prayer, a Christian prayer, and if anybody is so moved with a humanist prayer, maybe Pat, I don't know. But anyway, it's so joyous to know that UU is really open to the worth and dignity of every person. And we really are happy that UU's doing this. Thank you. And you're all invited if you could come. Thank you.
Hey everyone, faces new and old. I'm Benjamin, and I'm here with a candle of joy because this afternoon, right after service, we have the young adult group put together a trip to the Museum of Art in downtown because it's free for all residents of Columbia until September 1st. And I'd like to invite all of you who would like to come join us if you can. But if you can't, you can make a day of it on your own time because, as I said, it's free until September 1st for every citizen. And not to take away from that prayer vigil this afternoon at 4, if you can, as soon as you're done at the museum, please make your way back here to join in on that.
Nice touch, Benjamin. We light one final candle for those joys and concerns that remain silent in our hearts. Now let us have a moment of silent meditation and think on what we've heard and other things we know about. Thank you. This congregation participates in Share the Plate, which means half of our collection each Sunday goes to a local charity. It's a way of giving back to our community. If you wish to donate to Share the Plate, please write Share the Plate on the memo line of your check or donation envelope. Our Share the Plate recipient this month is Justice 360. And we are happy to say we have a speaker from Justice 360 to speak to us today about what they do there. Sierra Negron Salo.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I did not want to mess with this microphone if I didn't have to. Okay. If we didn't get to meet last time, my name is Sierra, and I'm the legal assistant at Justice 360. We are a South Carolina nonprofit dedicated to the advancement of equality and reformation of the criminal justice system. We focus on the most extreme sentences in the state, specifically death penalty appeals and juvenile cases where children are spending the rest of their lives in prison. And I wanted to touch a little bit on our juvie work this week. So in recent years, we have expanded our mission to represent juveniles facing sentences in adult court and seek to make lasting change on the way that children in our state are adjudicated. Specifically, we have gotten involved in directly representing juveniles facing lengthy sentences and the resentencing of juveniles who were originally sentenced to life without parole as a juvenile before the courts required consideration of their youth at sentencing. We have also gotten involved in litigation about the criteria used to waive children into adult court, which is based on a determination of factors by the family court that despite guidance from the courts that youth should be treated as a mitigating circumstance, we find that courts are commonly penalizing juveniles for the fact that they are children. Additionally, we have provided support and training for attorneys and legal teams representing vulnerable juveniles facing the potential of serious adult prison sentences throughout the state. Representing these kids who are facing these sentences requires investigation and expert assistance so that we can get a thorough consideration of the child, their brain development, their circumstances, and things throughout various junctures of their cases and their lives. This includes the family court's consideration of whether the child should be tried in adult court. This is what we call a waiver. And so because of this, if they're waived up, they're facing really long sentences, like life without parole, because they're being charged as adults. So for this reason, we require experts who go through, we work out the mitigating circumstances. In adult court, you might receive funding for this, but it is not common in juvenile cases, and this is why we need support from people like you. As always, thank you for allowing me to share. I know that was a lot of tough information. If you guys have any questions, many people here have my email. You could feel free to reach out to us online, and we are always happy to chat. Unfortunately, I have to head out. My husband decided to plan birthday plans for me today. Yes, but please, if you have any questions, I'm always happy to chat. You could email me, call. Yes, so thank you guys for having me and listening. And I hope everybody has a good rest of their Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you, Surya, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
Will the ushers please come forward? We receive these gifts with gratitude and appreciation. And now for our sermon, Overshooting and Drawing Down by Kevin McKinney.
And I am going to change fields because I'm sensible that there's a bunch of people over here whom I am currently blocking from seeing the screen. So I'm going to go over on the other side of the sanctuary here. Good recovery, huh? All right. Add that to the list of things that didn't go smoothly this morning. It's getting kind of long at this point. Okay. Well, I'm going to break a rule before I start the sermon proper by apologizing in advance. They tell you never to do that in music school. But I was told a bazillion times you have to keep this under 20 minutes. I tried, honest to goodness, I did. I cut and I cut and I cut and I cut and I practiced and I practiced and I practiced and I practiced and I still haven't made it under 20 minutes once. I will get close, I can say that much. So I won't try your patience too extraordinarily. But my main point in saying that isn't to apologize per se. It's actually to make sense of the fact that there's so much more that could be and perhaps should be said. There are many things I don't adjust. I talk about technology. I don't talk about personal responsibility. I don't talk about regenerative agriculture. I don't talk about natural carbon sinks. So just know I'm not ignoring all the stuff I didn't have time to talk about, okay? Fair enough? All right. So, have you actually heard of Earth Overshoot Day? Nope, no, probably not. But each year, the Earth can sustainably supply only a limited amount of what we call ecological services. And every year a day comes when our global ecological footprint totals up to that amount. Of course, we don't just drop everything and take the rest of the year off, although it might be nice. So Earth Overshoot Day is the day we go into ecological debt. And the currency that we pay that debt in is ecological degradation. Now, to estimate Overshoot Day, it's only an approximation, right? There's inexact measurements, there's simplifications, but as with an old school gas gauge, that guidance can still be crucial to making sure that you get where you want to go. This year, as you can see on the screen, Earth Overshoot Day falls on August 1st. That is this coming Thursday. So the rest of the year, we're theoretically degrading the environment, right? We're going beyond what we can support. Next slide, please, Bill. Now, Overshoot Day 2024 finds us at a crossroads. In the last couple of years, America has finally produced a legislative response to the climate crisis that actually merits the term. But, on the other hand, we may yet, I hope not, choose to elect a president who would once more renege on our commitment to climate action and whose supporters proudly chant, "Drill, baby, drill." We're also midway through a year that is all but certain to prove the warmest on record, supplanting last year's all-time mark. It's part of a trend that goes back most of our lifespans. Each successive decade from the 1950s on has been, on average, warmer than the preceding one. Next slide, please, Bill. There you go. The decades are all in all those pretty colors. So you can see that curve going up and up and up. In all, we've warmed more than 1 degree Celsius since we began releasing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere in mass quantities. The chief of these is carbon dioxide, and it's risen about 52%, give or take, so a lot. Next slide, if you would, Bill. Now, is this actually a problem? In other words, is it causing the warming, and is that problematic for us? Well, one indicator is NOAA's accounting of US billion-dollar weather and climate disasters. Yes, NOAA keeps track of this. Since 1980, the 5 worst years have all occurred since 2005. And you go ahead and give me the next one. The year Hurricane Katrina wrecked New Orleans. The most damaging year there was 2017. That's the one in the purple there at the top. So it was a bad year, 2017. More than 3,000 lives were lost, and economic losses were about $393 billion. Headline items were Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria, if you recall those. Next slide, please. By the way, NOAA does take inflation into account, so these are all apples to apples comparisons. They don't compare 1980s dollars to 2024 dollars. As with the global record, and as you see in this slide, every decade of billion-dollar disasters has gotten worse. I've graphed the number of events in blue. That red bar is hundreds of lives lost. And the kind of yellowy orange color is economic losses in tens of billions of dollars. And that last grouping on the right is the last 3 years. That's the present incomplete decade. So we're not looking like we're going to break the trend anytime soon. Okay. But we must also kind of place ourselves in relation to the future as well as the past. So to do that, we have to consider something called the carbon budget. And this is nerdy, sorry. But basically, if we pick some amount of global warming that we think is more or less kind of sort of safe, we can then figure out how much carbon it would take to get there and work backwards to find out, therefore, how much we can sort of safely emit. And that's called the carbon budget. And that's relative to a particular warming scenario, and it comes with a certain probability estimate and all that stuff. There are two main numbers that get talked about for that. 1.5 degrees C warming and 2 degrees. 2 degrees was basically a 70s era initial estimate. Nobody really knew too much about this at this point, what the impacts would be. And as they studied this more, they began to realize, well, we could do something like collapse the Greenland ice sheet or convert the Amazon rainforest to savanna. And that would be kind of bad. That would be a tipping point. So they brought in 1.5 C in order to kind of afford a little more margin for error, so to say. So, next slide, please, Bill. So what are the carbon budget numbers for those guardrails? Whoops, that's not the right slide. There should be a carbon budget slide next. Anyway, well, yep, backwards. There you go. There's the carbon budget slide. So the total emissions are shown in blue for those two scenarios. It's big numbers, 2,900 gigatons. Yeah, nerdy, right? And for 2C on the right, it's 3,700 gigatons. That's what the total that we can afford before we hit those amounts of warming with a 50-50 chance. Now, the bad news is the red is what we've already emitted. That's what we already put in the atmosphere. So our carbon budget is the yellow. We're just about out of carbon budget for the 1.5 sort of safe guardrail, and we have a little more left for the 2C, but not a lot in the scale of things. And on the right, it's just showing how steep the cuts that we need to make really are. So it's not much time to change our ways. Okay, move it on, Bill. Now to the past slide. How did we get here? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer historical snapshots. I'm going to feature everyone. I'm going to feature the CO2 level at the time. I'll give some climate science milestones, and I'll give you some general history. Fair warning, we're going to fly through this because 20 minutes. But I do hope a picture will emerge from this. It's kind of up to you to connect the dots, but I hope it'll be clear enough. Okay, take a deep breath. Here we go. Okay, next slide, please. We start in 1757 in Charleston, South Carolina, when a gentleman by the name of William Charles Wells was born. He's going to be the first climate science hero, quote unquote. While he was being born in Charleston, a gentleman in Edinburgh, Scotland, by the name of James Watt was starting his career as an instrument maker. He had not yet gotten interested in something called the steam engine, which was a pretty niche item at the time. On the Ohio frontier, this handsome gentleman was commanding the Virginia Regiment as they fought the French. His name, George Washington. Yes, George Washington was a redcoat officer in 1757. Next slide, please, Bill. So moving on to 1776, you can imagine why I picked that year. CO2 has moved up a point to 278 per million. That's the year that Washington forced the British out of Boston, yay. James Watt was selling the first models of his new improved steam engine. And Wells had gone back to England because his family was loyalist and they didn't want to hang around where their lives and property were at risk. So he started medical school at the University of Edinburgh, where, who knows, maybe he ran into James Watt sometimes. Okay, next slide. 1814, now we're up to 282 parts per million. And this is the year that Wells actually did what he's famous for in climate science. He published a paper called On Dew, and it was the very first paper that documented radiation from the atmosphere to the surface of the Earth. So there was no greenhouse theory yet. Nobody had an idea that anything existed, but he'd already made the first observations that bore on that. Meanwhile, George Stephenson built that steam locomotive, actually. He called it Blücher because he wanted to honor the Prussian general who just helped the British beat Napoleon Bonaparte. Okay, moving on to 1824 and dropping my paper. Moving on to 1824, CO2's up another point. That gentleman is Joseph Fourier. He was a French mathematician. He's still famous. His work is still important today. But he published that year the very first heat budget for the Earth. He studied all the outflows to space, the flow upwards from the ground, and he discovered that something about the atmosphere was making the planet warmer than it should be. This mysterious something would come to be called the greenhouse effect. So yes, this is literally the 200th anniversary year of the discovery of the greenhouse effect. So, moving on to the next slide, in the year 1856, carbon dioxide is now up to 286 parts per million. This photogenic young woman is called Eunice Newton Foote. And she was a suffragist, inventor, and amateur physicist. She published a paper showing that carbon dioxide and water vapor both warm disproportionately when you leave them in sunlight. And she speculated that atmospheric changes in either gas could change the climate. Her work was the first publication known by an American woman and maybe by any woman. And of course, it was then forgotten promptly for more than a century. Moving on to 1859, if you would, Bill. 1859, 1860, really. That gentleman is John Tyndall. While America was sliding into civil war under Lincoln, Tyndall was studying much the same thing that Eunice Foote had. He doesn't seem to have known of her work, but he extended it and drew the connection to Fourier's work. He was like, oh, this is what's doing it. This is what is causing what was still not yet called the greenhouse effect. So, 1860, our Civil War, that's when science was able to know both that there was a greenhouse effect and what was causing it. Okay, moving on again. This time, in 25 years or so, to 1886-87. CO2 is now up to 292 parts per million. That gentleman in the academic regalia is called Samuel Langley. Yes, he's got places named after him here and there. I'm not sure Langley, Virginia is one of them, but there are several. He was an astronomer and, among other things, did some observations of radiant heat in moonlight, contained in moonlight. Imagine that, measuring the heat in moonlight in 1886. And he did some of them at Mount Whitney because he wanted to make measurements at different altitudes, and that was a good way to do it back then. And the car is on there because that was the first production automobile. Carl Benz built that cute little trike there. Yes, Benz as in Mercedes-Benz. So let's move on another 10 years to 1895-96. That cute little caricature is of a gentleman called Svante Arrhenius. He was a Swedish chemist. And in part using Langley's moonlight observations, he hand calculated the first global model of carbon-induced warming. So that was the first time it was numerically modeled, 1896. Can you imagine? Meanwhile, Langley, having moved on, was flying that little model plane, steam-powered, no less, over the Potomac River. It was the first sustained powered flight, 1896, and a gentleman by the name of Alexander Graham Bell took the picture. And on the left, that gallery is actually an old photo of the very first AC power system installed by George Westinghouse. That was the powerhouse at Niagara Falls, and it fed power as far away as New York, Buffalo, New York, 25 miles or so. So things are changing, right? Okay, moving on. We're going to move into the 20th century now, 1901. CO2 is now at 296. I had to put Queen Victoria in there because she died that year, ending the Victorian era after 64 years on the throne. The gentleman you see on the right was a friend of Arrhenius's called Niels Ekholm. He was a balloon explorer as well as a meteorologist. And he was actually the first one to use the greenhouse metaphor. So this greenhouse effect finally got a name in 1901. So moving on, just a couple of years to 1903. Yes, 1903. Langley had moved on to aviation. It didn't go so well. That's his second attempt, crashing into the Potomac River, bottom right. However, 9 days later, the Wright brothers did their thing at Kitty Hawk, and we were now in the air age. CO2 has bumped up another point, of course, 297. It just kind of keeps happening that way. In other news from that year, Svante Arrhenius won the first Nobel Prize in chemistry, and the Ford Motor Company was reincorporated. So, move it on to 1918, last years of World War I. And by this point, with CO2 at breaking through for the first time through the 300 mark, 302, we've got 1 million automobiles already on American roads. Can you imagine? About half of them are Model T Fords. That's what you see on the left. And meanwhile, in Europe, yes, Model T Fords were serving as ambulances in the last years of the war. And 15 years after Kitty Hawk, that bomber you see there, that was a bomber plane. It was delivering 2,000 pounds of bombs at speeds of up to 97 miles an hour, 15 years after Kitty Hawk. All right, we're going to keep going because it's a gallop. We're going to move ahead to the dawn of World War II in 1938. That's Guy Callender. He was the very first. He was a steam technologist by trade, but he published the very first paper to examine human influence on the climate as a reality, not just a hypothetical possibility. So he did a lot of work on that. I have to censor myself here because 20 minutes. But I will note that his work paid a lot of attention to the sky radiation thing that good old William Charles Wells had spotted back more than 100 years before that. So sky radiation. Okay, moving onward to 1956 through 58 in our next slide. That was the period of the International Geophysical Year. The gentleman getting the award from W up there in the right-hand corner is called Charles Keeling, and he's the one who started the measurements of CO2, the direct measurements at Mauna Loa. They're still going on today. They call it the Keeling curve. In another thing that happened in that period, Roger Revel, didn't have a picture of him, but that boat is named after him, that research vessel you see. Revel wrote a paper with a guy named Hans Suess, and they were investigating a crucial question, which was absorption of carbon dioxide by the oceans. And they were the ones who actually coined the term, as far as we can tell, global warming. So that was the first use of that term, 56, 58. They had a great quote that I could not leave out. They said, or wrote, quote, "Human beings are now carrying out a large-scale geophysical experiment of a kind that could not have happened in the past, nor be reproduced in the future," end quote. And meanwhile, while all this was going on, the US Air Force was using a B-52, a plane that can carry 70,000 pounds of bombs at speeds above 500 miles per hour, on a test drop at McKinney Atoll in the Pacific. Not a high water mark in our treatment of indigenous folks around the world. Moving on to 1979. Carbon dioxide has now hit 335 parts per million. This is climate science landmark number 10. And a committee led by that gentleman, Jewel Charney, reported that the evidence for human-caused climate change was now incontrovertible. So there are those of us here who were not born in 1979. Yeah, I was just finishing music school about that time. Computer climate models, then quite new, let them estimate the doubling of CO2 would increase global average temperature by about 3 degrees Celsius, plus or minus 1.5. Okay, let's move on, Bill. Let's see. Yeah, so we get into the era of the International Panel on Climate Change. In 1990-91, CO2 is now at 350, which might actually be a safe level if we manage to stop it there. The first assessment report came out. They said that Earth had already warmed by 0.3 to 0.6 Celsius. They did not find human influence officially detectable yet. In other news, something called the World Wide Web open to the public. Okay, let's move forward. 2001, the year 2001: A Space Odyssey did not come out. But that's now the third assessment report. By now they're saying, okay, it's a 2/3 chance that most of the warming since the mid-20th century was due to human influence. So they're finding the evidence stronger now. Got to go forward now to 2007. That is the next assessment report, and I had to mention it because it's the one that won the Nobel Peace Prize that year. Shared it with Al Gore, as you may recall. Among their leading conclusions in 2007, warming of the climate system was, quote, unequivocal. Many observed changes were, quote, unprecedented. Atmospheric CO2 levels were unprecedented for at least 800,000 years, which is basically as far back as the Antarctic ice core record goes. That's where they're measuring, getting that number from. And by now they're finding 95 to 100% probability that human influence was the dominant cause of global warming. Okay, one last slide in this part of the talk, and that is from last year, 2003, the sixth assessment report came out. Now there's a couple of sections to each assessment report. Working Group 2 looks at the impacts rather than the physical science so much. So the Working Group 2 last year said that climate impacts are at the high end of previous estimates. In other words, most of the previous estimates had all been too low. They also said that at least 3.3 billion people are now affected. That's 40% of the world's population. They're considered highly vulnerable. And more specifically, with one particular risk, sea level rise, 1 billion people face flooding due to sea level rise. That certainly includes all our coastal cities here in the Southeast. So far in 2024, I figure y'all have seen the news, or at least some of it, right? You've certainly felt the heat, as we have out there at the lake. We've had many reports of flooding, storms, heat waves, and such. One I recall particularly told hauntingly of heat-struck Mexican howler monkeys falling dead out of trees. Yeah, I guess some of you remember that one too. But we're going to turn to the future at this point, and this is where we get a little less doom and gloomy, I'm glad to say, because I can feel the vibes sinking down there, out there. And I don't blame you. It's not good news that I've been presenting. Where are we headed? Well, we saw the exponential rise of CO2 in this last slide. You can see that curve going up in a quasi-exponential pattern. Bad, bad, bad news. Could you move it on for me, Bill, as soon as it will? Oh, you're trying, I see. Okay, he's working on it. So we saw the exponential rise, but although we are notoriously bad as a species at Fast and Furious, yes, that's kind of fitting in a tangential kind of way. He'll get it back. Anyway, explosions. We probably needed the comic relief right there. I had a joke, but I'm just going to leave it. That was funnier. There is a flip side to this exponential business, though, and I want to, this is where we're getting to next. Most analysts of technological and social change have also used a linear model to predict what's going on, which means that all the good stuff that's happening has also been drastically underpredicted. The same bias that's led us to fail to appreciate the danger has also led us to fail to appreciate some of the technological good news that's going on. And I've got to acknowledge, okay, yeah, thank you, Bill, that's awesome. So an acknowledgement here. This part of the things draws heavily from the Rocky Mountain Institute. Thank you, RMI, for this information and for the graphics that I got permission to use, yay. So there's this exponential deployment. Yeah, if you can, yeah, move it on when you can. We're ready for the next one. I know, it's a struggle. That one isn't fully realized on screen. But one reason for the exponential trends is that costs of all kinds of clean tech have plummeted. Wind and solar are now not only cheaper to build than coal or natural gas plants are, it's actually the case, there we go, clean tech costs, that's perfect. Clean tech costs falling rapidly, and you can see, again, the quasi-exponential curves there. There's irregularities in them, but they're cheaper not just to build in fossil generation. A lot of times they're cheaper to build and operate than it is to just operate a coal plant, or even a gas plant now. And that's actually, I think, in the next, yeah. I'm not sure where we're at, but that's okay. So this cost picture has attracted a lot of money. Money is pouring in to the sector. Go ahead and advance it if you can, Bill. Nope. Well, take it from me. Costs have come down a lot, and there's a lot of money coming in. We might make 20 minutes after all at this rate. Okay, there's the capital pouring in. Okay, one more. Let's hit the next one while we're on a roll. But there's a second advantage. Not only is this stuff cheaper, it's also fundamentally more efficient. Yeah, there's the exponential growth in the renewables as well. Yeah, moving along. We'll do the next one. So we're on to efficiency. For example, some folks are worried that all these electric vehicles that we're going to have are going to overstress the power grid. But it's not as big of a problem as you would think, because fossil fuel energy systems are very, very, very horribly inefficient. That's what this slide is showing. Up here you've got, I've got a handheld, I guess I can hold it. That's the energy that's in the fuels to start with. This is by the time you get them to where they need to go. And this is how much actual useful work you get out of it, basically. And that's across the whole system, so it's kind of a zoomed out thing. But I want to consider what happens when you drive an internal combustion car. So here's the deal. When you want to drive your ICE car, or my ICE car, because we have hybrids with ICE engines in them, the petroleum must be pumped from the ground. It must be conveyed to a refinery. It must be processed into gasoline, which must be sent to a distribution center, which must be trucked from there to a gas station. And that's the short version. There, you pay for all the preceding steps, pump the gas into your tank, and drive off happily. And what you don't know that keeps you a little happier is you only are actually getting about 40% of the work contained in that gasoline turning your wheels. Everything else is waste heat. That's why you have a radiator in your car, to radiate the waste heat away. Actually, it convects it, but that's another story. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. It just basically says that for a whole suite of clean tech technologies, they're about 3 times more efficient on average. Yeah. So just, yeah. There it is. Yep, there it is. That takes some parsing. I can share the slide deck if you really want the details later. So it's not surprising, and go ahead if you can, Bill. It's not surprising that the RMI analysts, there's more on the efficiency. They project that quite quickly, surprisingly quickly, we're going to see RE completely or largely push out some of these traditional technologies that we're so used to that seem so entrenched still today. Let's try the next slide. That one's showing that there's about a 20% saving, a reduction in electrical demand that we've seen to date from clean tech, by the way. That's what that slide is supposed to say. No, Fast and Furious, man, they really want to get us, don't they? Yeah, they're all driving nice cars, too. Okay. Anyway, they expected to go fast. Now, Exxon doesn't, okay, yeah, that's the one showing the speed, right? We're kind of right. You can't probably see it because it's so pale on the slide, but we're basically right on the cusp of change, according to the RMI analysts. The green and the green is the solar and wind. The yellow is other other clean tech. But anyway, and the gray, of course, is the fossil fuel. So they foresee a very steep, again, an exponential drop. Now, it may seem fantastic or overly optimistic, but go ahead, Bill. Next, we got this one clean. No Fast and Furious. We've actually seen this. These are all old technologies, like sailing to steamships and horses to trains, and then horses also to automotive. So these this is in fact not unprecedented by any means. These X diagrams. So to sum this part up, we are drawing down our emissions. We haven't quite hit global peak GHG yet, but we're getting close. This year, next year, 2030, it won't be long. Could you go two slides ahead, please, Bill? I'm going to skip one, I think, if we can. Yeah, that's the U.S. Showing that we're already 15 years past our peak in this country, believe it or not, for 4 major sectors. So how's that for something that's underreported, huh? So, yeah, there's the China illustration. Yeah, they've really been lashing. They've been adding more capacity in a year than many countries, actually, I think, than the rest of the world in a couple of instances actually possess. So whereas many folks expected China to be hooked on coal forever, that's not true, even though they're still building more coal. Okay, that's the best news. Paris is still feasible. Now, it's just barely feasible for the case of 1.5. We're very much in danger of missing that. But if we miss 1.5, it's 1.6 is still better than 1.8, and 1.8 is better than 2. Every 100th of a degree is seriously worth the struggle. So, here we are. We're poised between hope and fear. It's an exponential race, and it's going to be a tight one. We are growing exponentially, like the cyanobacteria we talked about in the opening words. Here we are. But unlike those cyanobacteria, we have the capacity to choose. We have choices to make. So, again, here we are, alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, and don't go too far because now you have closing words.
Cue the sigh of relief everywhere in the congregation. Okay, I did. Okay, that's only twice. After doing a non-traditional sermon, I felt it was only appropriate to close with words from the poet who is practically a patron saint of UU, Mary Oliver. This poem is called Moments. There are moments that cry out to be fulfilled, like telling someone you love them, or giving your money away, all of it. Your heart is beating, isn't it? You're not in chains, are you? There is nothing more pathetic than caution, when headlong might save a life, even, possibly, your own. And now I think, yes, now we're going to call the men of Encore up to do a congregational song to conclude. You have the lyrics in your bulletin, and your part is in bold. As you can see, it's very repetitious. You just sing over and over and over again. Keep it in the ground. And the melody that you sing, those two, is almost equally repetitious. You sing, keep it in the ground. So 3 notes, let's try that again. Keep it in the ground. And then I sing, yada, yada, something, and you sing, keep it in the ground, yada, yada, yada. Keep it in the ground. Fossils not the answer. Keep it in the ground. Preserve our atmosphere. That's it. Everything else is just to help you keep your place. Come on up, guys. Oh, it's also to help you understand what the words are because they go fast. Richard made that point, and he is 100% right. Plus, I might screw them up, so you'll know what the right words will have been if I do that. But yes, if you would like to stand for that, that would probably feel good and help you sing nice and loud. So this is poppy and rocky and choppy, so lots of accents. All right, y'all ready? Okay. We'll do a little intro like we usually do. I messed it up. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep it in the ground. Don't pump that carbon. We don't want it here. Keep it in the ground. Coal is not the answer. Keep it in the ground. Preserve our atmosphere. Keep it in the ground. No bitumen now. Keep it in the ground. We don't want it here. Keep it in the ground. Fossils not the answer. Keep it in the ground. Preserve our atmosphere. Rising water, falling water, missing water, toxic water. People, plants, and animals all fight for their lives. Freezing spring, melting winter, deluge, autumn, brick kiln, summer. Ancient psycho splinter into shrapnel that drives through the web of all being that cradles our lives. So listen, please listen, our children must thrive. Don't imperil their lives. Just keep it in the ground. Don't frack that nat gas, keep it in the ground. We don't want it here, keep it in the ground. Carbon's not the answer, keep it in the ground. Preserve our atmosphere, keep it in the ground. Use wind and sunshine, keep it in the ground. Green power's here, keep it in the ground. That's a wiser answer, keep it in the ground. Preserve our atmosphere. Preserve our atmosphere. Preserve our atmosphere. Preserve our atmosphere. Carbon in the ground. Nice job, nice job. Thank you, guys. Great dog. No, dozed off.
Yeah, you might as well remain standing. Well, you know, we wanted you to be entertained. I will be extinguishing the chalice as soon as I finish reading this. May its flame glow gently in our hearts and light our paths as we leave this place until we are together again.
Please join me in the congregational benediction as found in your order of service.
May the blessings of truth be upon us. May the power of love direct us. And may the peace of this strong unity sustain us. Till we meet
This concludes our service. Thank you to the musicians.